Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por participar en nuestro nuevo Ask Me Anything.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being part of this Ask Me Anything session. This time we will talk about Angular. We will work as usual. First, we will introduce our speakers. Then we will have a brief presentation. And after that, we will have a Q&A session. So for that Q&A session, feel free to use your microphone, turn on your cameras, and ask any questions directly. Or you may write them on the chat. Also, this session has simultaneous interpretation into English and Portuguese. So if you want to choose this option, you only need to click on the interpretation icon in the bottom part of your screens and choose your language of preference. So without further ado, Martin, the floor is yours. Thank you, Anibal. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. My name is Martin Torrado. I work in the support team of GeneXus, and I'm here with Alejandro Silva. He's the one in charge of all the development of this Angular generator, of which we will be talking about today, and also Rodolfo Roballo, who works in the training team. As Anibal was saying, we will have a little overview on the Angular generator to sort of break the ice, and then we will move on to the Q&A session where you will just ask any questions that you may have. So let's start. So about the Angular generator, what is Angular? Angular is a framework that was developed by Google, as many of you may know. It is based on TypeScript, and it's thought for the development of web and web mobile applications. It's open source, and it's fast, it's performing, and it's ideal for any kind of customer-facing applications. Another typical feature, particularly if you work with GeneXus, is that it's really easy if you have a mobile application to work with the web and web mobile leg of things. Why this? Because the architecture of our Angular generator is based on the smart devices architecture. What that means is that in GeneXus, we will be working with the panel objects in the same way that we do when we develop an Android or an iOS application. And this gives us the possibility of, from one single panel object, we can generate iOS, Android, and also now with the Angular generator for web and web mobile applications. So this is a very strong feature and a huge advantage that we have with this kind of development. Okay, so how to start? How can you get started with the generator? What you need to do is at the bottom, in the bottom of the screen, you will have a reference to the wiki page that has all the requirements, which are basically the three that appear there. You need Node.js and Angular CDI, also the npm, but usually the installer comes with a Node installation. So just with those two requirements, that should be more than enough for you to get it up and running with GeneXus. And another thing that I wanted to tell you about is that now it's thought that towards the end of December, we will have a course on the Angular generator itself. So soon you will be having this course available. Okay, so in terms of the architecture, I told you before that it's based on the smart devices architecture. It's an architecture that is based on REST services that allows us to work with the backend and the data. And it's a three-layer architecture, 3 layers that run on the client side, that will be on the browser side. The first one is the UI layer, which is, in a nutshell, the layout of our panels. It's basically HTML5 with some elements and attributes that Angular interprets to bind it with the data model. That is the first layer. Then you have the second layer, which is components. That is the panel logics. It's a TypeScript file that is loaded, that it's in charge of handling the states and the components of the UI side. And finally, you have the connector, which is the third layer. That would be sort of the proxy of the, that is the one that communicates with the server and with the backend on behalf of the client. So that is, in a nutshell, the architecture of our Angular generator. Then what about what it generates? What about what you get with the generator? you get a new folder in your mobile directory that you knew beforehand for native applications. It will create a new folder called Angular, and in that folder, per each panel main that you have, you will have at the same time another folder, which we will see in further detail in this slide. There you have the structure of an Angular project. As you can see up there in the root, you have the mobile folder, then the Angular folder, and then your main object, which is in this case the view home object. And for those of you that are working with Angular, you can see that this is a project structure that is very traditional for Angular. If you go even into further detail, you can see specifically what I was telling you about the three-layer architecture. We have three generated files, one which is the HTML, everything that is about, the UI's layout, which is HTML5. Then you have the component, the behavior of events and states, and then you have the service TS, which is the one that communicates with the server. So in those three files, you have summarized your panel, let's say. One of the most important things that I wanted to tell you about this Angular generator is that we avoid what we call lock-in. One of the things that is used to often criticize code generators is that they generate code that it cannot be read by someone that is using that technology by hand, to put it in a way. So that is one of the things that with the Angular generator we have avoided. We generate code that can be easily interpreted by a human Angular developer. So if it can be interpreted, therefore it can be modified and extended. That is one of the strongest points of what we have generated with this new generator. I also wanted to tell you a bit about, well, if you're using GeneXus for other technologies, you will be used to this, which is the future-proof thing. Specifically, Angular has 2 major versions per year. This means that the GeneXus developer, if they're working with the last version, they don't have to worry about compatibility because GeneXus does that itself. It always updates and provides ongoing support for these technologies. So I believe this to be one of the strongest points of the generator as well. Also, briefly talking about deployment. How do you deploy an Angular application? Well, as GeneXus works, we have this build mode, which is a property that needs to be in distribution mode. And then in the background, you will have the ng build command running, and this will generate a new folder within that folder that we previously mentioned, which is called dist for distribution. And in that folder, you have all the files that you will deploy. Then this is in terms of front end, but in terms of back end, it's in the good old traditional way that we've been working for long. You could be Java, Net Core, and the deploy is done exactly in the same way. Everything that is services and databases, well, it's the same. And then I wanted to just give you an overview of a sample that we've worked with this generator in GeneXus. We call it Travel Agency. And just to show you a couple of the screens that you can generate using this. This is just to illustrate things. And the counterpart of that application execution is what I was telling you about. In GeneXus, we have panels. These panels are then generated with the Angular generator. Once you have developed your panels, what you need to do is you go to the front-end node of your preferences in GeneXus, and you activate as true the property that is called generate Angular. And that will mean that those panels that you have in your KB Explorer will be interpreted and generated for this new technology. Okay, so what can you do to try it on top of the requirements that we have already talked about? You can give it a try in our latest upgrade, which is V17 upgrade 7. That is the last upgrade that we released. you can try all of the things that I've told you about. So as I told you before, now we have an open Q&A session. Again, you have Alejandro and Rodolfo who will be joining me in the Q&A session. So, well, that's it.
Perfecto, ya está abierto. Aquellos que quieran
Okay,
hacer
great. So those of you that want to ask a question, please do feel free to turn on your mics and cameras and ask the questions yourself, your questions yourself. But I have a couple of questions that we have on the chat. We have Germán Murcia, who is telling us, I understand that the future web panel and panel will be unified in panel. Is that true? Yes, that is true. We don't think that's going to happen in the short term. We're on the way of making these two programming models converge, and not only the models, but also we're trying to converge both the Angular generator and our web generator. We have our own framework. We call it GeneXus framework for the web generator. It's also it's also known as Java.net, and we want to converge the different levels. One is the programming level, in which I'd say that, for example, the combo 6 that you require for the panels is no longer required in this 7th version. So we're on the way to begin extending a model, this panel model, to the web panel and the web panel to the panel. So probably not in the short term, but definitely happening. And we're also trying to, make the generators themselves converge. It doesn't mean that we will have one generator, but rather that the technology that we're using to work with the Angular generator is also having some things added on the web generator, based on what we learned from the Angular generator. So that is a point that I'm glad that you asked the question, because that was one of the things that I really wanted to talk about in this session. We have a convergence road between both generators lying ahead, and the idea is that they will not replace each other, but rather coexist. Okay, we have Germán that also asks us if you can generate Angular from web applications that are already made. Well, not now. So we have the programming of our SDE panels. So the programming model for smart applications, which are panels. And we started there because it gave us a lot of advantages in terms of the fact that it allowed us to be much closer to making a 3-layer generator for the client. And to overcome that in the web generator, you need to overcome some previous issues, which makes it a longer road. But yeah, it's in the horizon. I mean, not for the short term, but the idea is that both the Angular generator and the Angular generator will include things from the programming model of the web generator and vice versa. So the closer they get, the easier it will be for us to think about a mechanism through which web panels can be generated as panels or something of the likes. But before that, we need to get the programming models closer to each other, which is a task that we have, as I said, coming up. We need to, face it in the midterm. Let me add something, Alejandro, if you don't mind. From the developer's point of view, each generator today has its own advantages for some things. So it's easier or better to use one generator rather than the other. For example, back office applications. Nowadays, the GeneXus framework generator will provide you with good data variations, because you have variations per field. With web panels, you have responsive models. So there are a number of advantages that you will get if you're using the GeneXus framework, the good old GeneXus framework generator, and working with web panels. But by contrast, the Angular generator, because Angular is specialized in having a rendering speed much better for web pages, that is ideal for customer-facing applications. So if you're thinking about, let's say, an application that does require a lot of performance, then probably it's better to use the Angular generator. And so because of that, probably they will keep on coexisting, even though they are converging, as you said, because nowadays you can use each of them for what is best and take the most out of it. Okay, one more thing that I wanted to add on top of what Rodolfo said. There is a clear example that gives clear advantages, which is, for example, when you have mobile first. So you have your mobile application and you need that web and web mobile leg. That transition is made easier by the Angular generator and not so much if you have to do it from scratch on the web itself. Okay, so we have another question. There are some functionalities that are not available. Are there any functionalities or features that are not available in the Angular generator? And the answer is yes, we have some features that are not available. We have a document that precisely goes through what is and what is not available. And in terms of the SD application model, for instance, some things are not available because they don't make sense, to have them running on a browser, but some other things are not available, or to put it in a better words, some things are available in the programming model for panel applications, and that would be, for example, the case of user control 2.0, master panel, etc. So the Angular generator is walking kind of like in some middle ground. So the functionality that you can have in an SD and in a web application is different, because in an SD application in GeneXus, you don't have user control 2.0, but you do have it in Angular and the Angular generator. So it's a bit about this convergence that we were talking about, right? We're trying to get the Angular generator closer to the web generator. I have just written on the chat the wiki page where you will find the features that are still missing in Angular. Thank you, Rodolfo. Cesar Giuliani is asking us, the Angular generator, will we be able to use device features such as camera, GPS, microphone, and so on? Yes, as much as the browser supports it. The restriction that we have, if I may, is what we can do through a browser for a web app. We're generating a web app, so there are some APIs that we still haven't implemented, but it's a matter of timing. Probably they will be implemented soon. Things such as, screenshots and print screen and stuff like that, you can do it. Okay, another question. I'm interested in the Angular course. Is it free? Will it be available on GX Training? Yes, it will be free and it will be available on GX Training. The course is very advanced and we are expecting to release it towards the end of December, and it will be published on the training website together with all the videos and they will be free. Carlos Gonzalez has a couple of questions. He says, I have two questions, although he wrote three. Is it possible to create Angular applications offline, PWA offline? Yeah, sorry. Yes, you can create PWA applications, but a PWA application is not the same as an offline iOS or Android application. So you may, and the results of the requests will be cached locally, but that is not the same as an offline GeneXus application. I want to make that very clear, just in case, perhaps what he was asking is whether or not that was PWA. One thing, it's if you talk about PWA, where you have a certain disconnection margin, and another thing, a certain offline level, and then you have an offline application, which is absolutely offline. They're two different things. Offline GeneXus application in our Angular generator, that's not available. It's a connected application. It can be PWA, yes. As a matter of fact, they are. And when you set it up for production, and automatically it's generated automatically as PWA. Okay, then he also asks, if I want to move an application made with web panels to panels in Angular, is there any option that will make this more agile? Yeah, well, that's a bit of what we have discussed. Today, we just don't have this, possibility of having an output for a web panel as a panel. The programming model doesn't give you that now. So we are still to implement or solve a couple of things on the Angular side of things to truly manage to get to this point in which you could do what this person's asking. But again, it's part of a roadmap. I would say that the easiest thing, though, it's the other way around. So if you have a smart devices application for Android or iOS, then moving that to Angular it's so trivial, so straightforward. And there are some implementations that will make that that migration even easier, especially in terms of layout. But from web panels to panels, no, nothing is available yet. And then he also asked, what is the compatibility with certain user controls that are specific for web? Okay, so we've worked a lot on that. The Angular generator, because it was coming from the smart devices generator, it didn't have user controls. So one of the things that we implemented in our Angular generator is the possibility of integrating user controls 2.0. As a matter of fact, well, in the same way that you can do it in the web generator, in Angular, when you define user control 2.0, it allows some other things if you compare it to the web generator. For instance, it allows you to add information to import your NPM package. So it makes it really easy in terms of integrating external controls such as user control 2.0. That's one thing. But then also user controls 1.0 are not supported by Angular in GeneXus. What you can do is you can have a wrapper in the user control 2.0 of that. Jorge Izquierdo asked us, what would be the transition from an Android app to a web or a web mobile app be like? What would it be like? With Angular, of course, I will take that for granted. So there are different things that need to be, careful about. There are some things that are not supported by Angular. So if it is an offline application, then even though you could define an offline main and get everything, together, it will depend on how it is implemented to see whether or not you can make this transition easy or not in terms of costs, especially. If you have an iOS or Android online application, then you need to generate it. One of the features that we have that makes this thing really easy in our Angular generator is this. In GeneXus, when the generator is associated to a platform, this Angular generator is a web platform, and Android and iOS platforms. What happens is that when you define a specific layout for iOS, that layout will not be considered, will be ignored by the other platform. As part of this trend of trying to simplify the transition from one application to an Angular application, is that through a property, sorry, I'm going to backpedal a bit. Angular would require you to define your panel, that panel that you defined for iOS. Well, it should be defined for a web platform. That is like that by default. But one thing that we added is to generate the Angular application as if it were the iOS application. So the panels that will be used by Angular to generate the application, instead of being the web platforms, will be the iOS platform. So you don't have to work with more panels or new panels for those very specific panels that were made for platforms. One of the properties that the generator has is, what platform do I prefer when I can't solve the web platform layout? And that really simplifies the transition between applications. You could get an online Android application and generate it in Angular. So if it doesn't have any API or servers that has to access any phone feature that is not implemented in Angular, then it should work automatically. Jorge, I'd like to add to this, as Alejandro said, that very object can be generated in Angular. The thing is that if you want to see that information that was thought for a mobile application in a desktop, then you will have to create in the same panel another layout, and that layout will, it can be web. But you don't have, you have web platforms, and within web you have different sizes. For instance, web big screen or web tablet. So it could be not only web, but also to create a web specific for the different sizes in which you want to display it by adding a new layout. So automatically it will detect what is being run, and it will take the layout that you designed for that platform in particular. Okay, great. Another question. Do you know if there is any progress in the pattern providers, K2B, WW+, etc., to use the Angular generator? I don't know specifically if they're working on this. I do know that they're using that K2B, they're using the Angular generator, and they've done several tests in terms of user controls and stuff like that. But I don't know if they have a roadmap for this. No, so no, I don't really know. We've worked with them with the generator, and it's being tested, and they are developing some new stuff, but I don't know what's going to happen with those providers. I reckon that sooner or later they will be updated. Carlos is asking us if Unanimo will be available for Angular. Yep, yes, it will. As a matter of fact, we've been giving it a try. In the last upgrade, we worked a lot on the design system. Even in Angular, the design system has a design system is usually much more powerful than a theme. So it allows you to work with more complex selectors and media queries and so on. So even though Android SD platforms are not supported by the generators because it's a different model altogether, they are supported by the Angular generator to a certain point, and we will keep on working with this so that you can again, it's part of this convergence journey, right, with the web generator. At this point, it can support more than the Angular generator. Cesar Giuliani is asking us, in terms of the security scanner, do you run the same controls that for your web panels? I mean, do you need to take into account the same risks? I'd say that in terms of backend, at least, I think that risks are similar to those that you'll have for a smart device application, especially for open services. Then from the security point of view, we are working to constantly update libraries because we're always updating packages for security reasons. And that is one of the things that Martin said. We're constantly updating the packages so that they meet, the highest security standards. So it's very common when you have a third-party package, which of course are often used by the generator, that you will have some security problems. So when you transpile it, when you install with the NPM, usually you have some security recommendations that pop up. And so we try to keep it as updated as possible. And each upgrade that we do for the Angular generator, well, we try to do that upgrade, including the latest third-party packages that we are using. Even though the backend is the same as the SD backend, and we apply the same security tests. So in that sense, I think that we are doing okay, more than okay. Actually, upgrade 7 now will have Angular 13. So it's updated. for it to use Angular 13. Okay, I have another question that says, what version of Angular is using the Angular generator? So yeah, that's what you said, right? Yes, what we try to do always is that, well, Angular has like 2 versions released per year. Now in November, we got the 13th version, and 1 week after that, we were internally testing it in our generator. And in this version, in this upgrade 7 of GeneXus, we are releasing it with Angular 13 supported. Okay, our friends from El Impar ask us, what server do you use to deploy Angular? Okay, so in that sense, the Angular generator works in different ways. So when you're working with prototyping, or when you're working in GeneXus trying different things, usually we use a local node server because it's the easiest and fastest thing to update. It's immediate, so you generate and automatically you see your changes because everything is connected. There's Node server that if you have to work with a port and a host and blah 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 blah, that is much faster. We have a property that I can't remember the name of, Martin. I think it's called deploy target. Is it? Run target. There you go. And you can basically decide how it's going to be deployed. So for instance, you have deployed to cloud. We also support deployed on IS locally. So on top of the node that I was telling you about, you can deploy IS. And then those servers, of course, are the ones that we support. And backend could be Java, .NET, .NET Core. As a matter of fact, we were working on a project, which is an application that we are using the Angular generated. And this application will run on TikTok. And that application is being deployed with Java serverless. So the backend is Java serverless, and the application has it's deployed. Well, it is deployed. All the translation is done in Java serverless. Okay, Christian is asking us if there is a trial version for the Angular generator, or is it for free? The trial GeneXus version, the GeneXus trial version includes the Angular generator. And in particular, everything that you do in the course, which is quite a lot, is done with the trial version. Now, sorry, Anibal, I want to add something to that in terms of licensing. There are some packages that include the Angular generator, and there are then you have the corporate package that you get the generator in itself. Thank you, Jaime. Okay, we have a couple of questions, but I think that Rodolfo told us a bit about that. Lucia asked us, for which applications should you use the Angular generator? Okay, I'd say that in those applications that you need to be fast, even though it is true that with web panels and common generators, you can do it anyway, because, well, the Angular generator probably is the one that is specially made for applications that require a lot of, demand on the client side, which are usually the ones that, are oriented to the end user. That's why we talked about, for example, customer face applications. Yeah, let me add something to that, Rodolfo. So we have basically 2 generators. And this is a bit of what Rodolfo was saying at the beginning. Those 2 generators include one web generator that those of you that have worked with GeneXus know well. The programming model is a bit different. It's a bit more high level, if I may, in terms of some of the features that it has. regarding its user interface. So for example, the generator will resolve automatically all the validation when you change from one field to the other. And in a certain way, this adds some extra burden to what you need on the client side, because even though that is not in Angular, you don't have the field-to-field validation. So that is what we talked about when we talked about the convergence model. So technically speaking, I want to clarify perhaps what Rodolfo said a couple of minutes ago. So it's not that the web generator is slow, but the Angular generator is faster, because the kind of thing that the client needs to do is not as heavy, let's say, and it's done in a different way. But at the same time, the same validation that you can do with your web generator for field to field, you can do that on your Angular generator, but in a different way. How can I put this? By programming a little bit more. It doesn't mean that you can't do it in Angular, that you can't get that sort of UI that is very precise in terms of what the user does. So both things can be done in both generators, but the web generator will allow you to be a bit more abstract. And these are things that we want to add to the Angular generator in the midterm, because they're not available, but still you can implement that. It just requires some further coding. That would be the difference in a way. So for applications that need to be very precise and accurate in terms of what the user does, then probably, what we call usually back office applications, then maybe it would be better if you use the web generator. And for those applications that don't require such control, and applications that can penalize the speed in terms of the UI response, I don't mean the servers in the backend area, but only what's going on in the browser, then usually the Angular generator, just because of its architecture and because of the architecture of how we generate it and what we have on the client side, then maybe that could be a bit faster. So that is, probably one of the main differences. And it's a better fit for lighter applications, if we may use that term, on the client side. But as I said at the beginning, we are trying to make that converge towards a point in which each of them will have their own pros and cons, but not from the GeneXus model point of view. Okay, very good. We have one for Jaime. They're asking if the Angular generator is in the ISB package. And yes, that is correct. The Angular generator is included in the package that we call GeneXus for ISB for software houses. It's one of the generators that comes with a package. The GeneXus for startups package does not include it. And for those of you that get your enterprise licenses, in that case, you can buy it as an extra license, as a special license, if you want to get the Angular generator. But it is correct. The GeneXus for ISB package does include the Angular generator. Thank you, Jaime. Jorge is asking us, I tried the Angular generator in something basic, and it came with some new GX17 stuff. The process was a bit slow, at least the first time. Is it currently faster? I don't know if I understand what you mean by, I think you mean in terms of what it does when it, so the generator nowadays can be configured to work in 3 different ways. When you're working with the Angular generator, you work with 3 different ways. One is what we call, I think, prototype mode, yes, which is the build mode property. Very good. So the prototype mode, what it does is the first time that you use the generator and you generate, it installs the smallest number of things possible so that you can have it running as fast as possible. So the first build that you do in Angular usually takes not so much the build, but the run, because it needs to download and install everything. It works based on npm, so yeah, it has to download Angular. If you don't have it, you don't have to install it. You don't have to install Angular in your machines, because when you do this, it will install itself. So we install as little as possible so that it will be as fast as possible when you're using your generator and it's running. In the development mode, what we do is we have some other things, but we leave the application after the build ready so that you can deploy it in a production server. This means that it's optimized with all the debugging features off, and that is the other mode, which is a bit more expensive. But it has these features for the final deployment. And then finally, we have this third mode, which is deployment. This deployment includes everything that you need to use your generator. As we saw a couple of slides ago, you have a new folder, a new test folder that includes a number of things. So you get the package ready with an entry so that you can run tests, automated tests if required. And so it provides a lot more support for testing and so on and so forth. And I mean testing from the JavaScript side of things. And that is the longest build that you have. Originally, the first versions that we launched, especially the preview versions, the default mode was the develop, and that was really heavy. So for you to have an idea, you have to download something like 700 megabytes of things, including Angular and everything that you need to test it and all the support. So it was really heavy, even Chromium. So you see that it's really heavy, but you install it the first time. And then once that is done, you don't need to do it again unless you update your GeneXus version, in which you will have to run the install again because probably the Angular version has changed and you need to do it again. That is a bit of the way this generator, this is the way the generator runs and works. Yes, I meant command mode Windows. I think it was Angular. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's it. It's exactly that. It's that that window that you have that is no longer like that. The installing is done in the GeneXus output. You do have the window when it's working with a node, but when you have the run target, when that is the default that you're using the local node server to make it faster, then you have to work with the screen, and every single time that you generate something, you will see that the window changes when it generates its own source. Angular transpiles it. So the first time, it installs everything. So that's why it takes a while, but it's equivalent to having to manually install Angular or whatever. The advantage is that you don't have to do it because it's done automatically with the setup. And also the Angular is updated, you change the version, which is also something that you don't need to do. It's done automatically. And that is the price to pay. That first setup that takes a bit longer because it's heavier. And then Jorge, by default, the build mode property is always in prototype, so it will do the minimum possible to be run. It's quite fast. Here I have a question by Gonzalo that says, how can I use my applications in the Angular generator? You can do that with user control 2.0, and that programming model works. If it's not a user control 2.0 and it's a JavaScript, you will need to work with a wrapper that will allow you to work with user control 2.0, which is relatively straightforward. Okay, just as a comment on the chat, you will have a wiki document that talks about user control 2.0 support and all the input of NPM packages. So there's a document on the wiki that is available on the chat. Any other questions by the audience? Okay, we have here Alejandro Silva, who is Rodolfo. We have Martin. not every day will you have so many experts available for you to ask any questions on the generator. So today's the day. Guys, any comments, anything that you may have left out that you would like to just add last minute? Germán asks, Martin's presentation said that the last version was V17 upgrade 7. Yeah, that is being released. I mean, we just we're about to take it out of the oven. We are in that stage in which we're not touching it anymore, and we're just documenting things. So it's the version that you will have with the Angular 13 support. Yeah, the other one is Angular 12. U6 supports Angular 12. Maybe one of the things that we could mention, because I don't know if it was said, is that you can do a sketch design import and run it on Angular. Yeah, actually, that is what Martin showed. The screenshots that Martin showed us, that is really, really good. Because what it does is it generates panels. This is a previous step. So we have some things that are really, really cool. The design system is also really cool. I think these are huge improvements in the area. And this opens up a whole number of opportunities for Angular, especially. That and, Sketch, I think, are two amazing features. If I may I ask a question? Is there a migration guideline to get one application that was developed in mobile? Well, is there a guide that tells you how to migrate it to this platform? Any guidelines available? I think there is a guideline. You have the wiki documents that tell you about how to use the generator. And then what Ali was saying about, the missing features that we have today that are still working in mobile but are not ready for Angular, and they're not web compatible. And with those two things, probably you could do that migration. You could go from mobile to Angular, but that should be very linear, very straightforward to transform your application using the Angular generator. I don't know if Ali has anything else to add about this. Well, we don't have a step-by-step guideline, which gets me thinking, and perhaps we should, but you don't have that many steps, at least what I can think of. You need to know some things about the application that will prevent it from being generated in Angular. For example, the offline components that we talked about at the beginning. If it's offline, it won't run. So knowing that, and also another thing that could be interesting to highlight is the layout management. Again, if all layouts are done for iOS or Android, you will have to configure a property. Probably we could put together a document that is relatively short and that could work as a step-by-step guideline for this. So, but it's what Martin said. All of that is documented, and the documentation that we have is not that extensive either. Because the Angular generator is yet another generator apart from one or two limitations that could be documented. But apart from that, it's GeneXus is a programming model itself. So maybe take a look at that wiki documentation that is available, and maybe Martin, we can put together a doc for this. What do you think? Yeah, it's not the first time that I've been asked about this. So yeah, that sounds interesting. Okay, we have Luis, who says, you said that it generates backend for Java, .NET, Netcore. Can it generate backend for Python or PHP? No, no, it's not supported. Any other comments? Any questions that you may have? Okay, yeah, Oscar here again. If you want to encapsulate an external object in this generator, how complex is it regarding, the other generators? Well, precisely, external object is one of those features that we are modifying in the way that it's defined for Angular, and also we want it to be the same for web generators in the midterm. We haven't been able to do that for the upgrade 7, but certainly it will be in upgrade 8, and that is the possibility of defining an external object by referencing an npm package, and within that npm package, a function or whatever, and import it in that way. The external object in Angular, as I said, is not for upgrade 7. I'd say that it's 60% implemented, but yeah, we left it behind, because we focused on some other stuff that we thought was, more imminent. But what you will be able to do is to declare an external object in GeneXus, and that external object will have some new properties that that you will have to say which package it is, what version. Thinking about the npm, right? What npm package version it is, how it, what's the name of the functions or objects to be imported, and then the generator will use that. The Angular generator in particular will use that. So when it generates the JSON package, it will include the package with that version, and when it generates the, when it calls the function, it will add the import and the reference to that package. Again, you do npm install, you download the package as you would do if you're, coding by hand in an Angular application. So that would be the model that we are thinking about releasing soon for external objects for the Angular generator. Thank you. And what about georeferencing and geolocation, maps, etc.? Will there be any limitations in that sense? This is actually something that we tried yesterday. We are supporting already the build as a control type maps. As part of that build, we're also supporting the location of different points in a map as a geography type object, as a geo-domain location, or as a geo-point. All of that is supported. And what else about that? We also support a selection layer with events, when you move the map with the clicker, but we're not supporting the whole of the maps implementation, but all of that some layers, for example, like navigation or routing is not supported, and also map zones, that is not supported, but points, yeah, fully supported. And if you use it like picker, that is also supported. Thank you very much. Okay, so last couple of minutes. Any other questions? Okay, so if we have no further questions before we close the session and taking advantage of having Martin here, Martin, could you tell us a bit about the migration of our forums to Stack Overflow? Yep. totally. I wanted to tell you a bit about Stack Overflow. We have left traditional forums that maybe you're used to using for any questions that you have. And nowadays, we are using Stack Overflow as a platform to have any technical GeneXus queries or questions that you may have. You may have your technical questions added on using the GeneXus tag, and you will have the whole community that is giving feedback to each other and helping out each other to answer those questions. We will also be, going through the different questions that appear in the forum so that we can also give our own contributions. But yeah, we wanted to encourage you to, if you're using the Angular generator or any GeneXus product, to please do use Stack Overflow for any technical questions that you may have. It's, this platform is top class worldwide for this, and we are using it more and more. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ale, Rodolfo, Martin, and everyone for being here with us. Remember that this webinar is recorded, and you will find it in our website, genexus.com/webinar, and you can also find the upcoming webinars on our website. So thanks a lot and see you soon. Bye-bye.